everyone, and welcome back to the Adoption Squad. I am your host, Mary. Annie will join us in future episodes. Today I will speak with Kevin Barhydt. Kevin is a YouTube creator and the author of Dear Stephen Michael's Mother. His YouTube channel creates a safe space for survivors of addiction, abandonment, adoption, and child sexual abuse, and to explore the healing process. Abandoned by his mother at birth, Kevin was enveloped in a labyrinth of adoption, addiction, and child sexual abuse. By age 20, a shell of the boy he once was, Kevin succumbed completely to a suicidal lifestyle of drug dealing and prostitution. At 45, after many years of recovery, Kevin began a painful journey to uncover his origins and the hopeful search for his mother. His book, Dear Stephen Michael's Mother, chronicles the unfolding of these stories. Here's our conversation. Okay, so first of all, Kevin, thank you so much for meeting with me today. I'm in the midst of reading your book, and I am absolutely a huge fan. I love how it's written. It's so beautiful. The first thing I wanted to ask you, though, is when in your life did you decide to put this story together and to get it out there to people?
Thanks for having me. I'm so glad to be here, Mary. And I do wish that it could have been the three of us, but I know Annie's busy and that's fine. It's wonderful to have that question asked because most people, I think about a book, they conceive of a book. And I never saw myself as a writer. I love to write, I love to read, and my training is actually in theater, similar to yours, and education, which is where I work now. And so I've always had a love of conveying a good story. And usually it was from the stage. And I've written some plays and I've worked in that world. The actual concept for the book came from the search for my biological mother. And during the search, I spent a great deal of time communicating with some of the birth mothers, some of the search angels, the adoptees, and then other friends and family who were very supportive of me in my search. And it took 2 years. That's part of the book, is it covers a 2-year period of time when I searched for my bio family, my first mother. And while I was doing that, the way I was communicating was by emailing. And of course, some days were just these long email threads. This is what happened today. This is what happened. Oh my goodness, this happened. Or, oh my goodness, I'm frustrated with this. And as time wore on, people would say, this is an amazing story, Kevin, you should write it. And of course, as the search culminates and finalizes, comes to its natural conclusion, there's a lot of emails. If you look back through all my emails at that time, you'll see where the book comes from. And what I did was I started taking those suggestions seriously. People said, Kevin, this is a story that is worth telling. Now, the book itself, though, isn't just about the search. And that's the tricky part. When everyone was telling me you should write the book, they wanted me to write about the search because it's got its ups and downs, but it's this wonderful story about an adoptee looking for his roots, his family. And there's a longing there. And many people can identify with that. And I started thinking about it. But what really happened was I said, I can't just tell that story. There was a part of me that said, that felt like a paragraph. That felt like a couple of chapters. That felt like a blog post. That felt like an article. But my story is more than that. And what I couldn't tell you the date or the actual date or time right now off the top of my head, but it's actually in an email. What I decided to do was probably 3 a.m. one night. I couldn't sleep. And I came downstairs at the house we lived in at the time. And I took out my laptop and I opened my email. And I realized that I had been writing this story all along. It was in all these emails that I had been sending. And so I gathered all these emails together, put them in a folder in the Google Drive, in a Google folder. And then I sat down and I wrote a different email. I wrote an email to myself. I wrote an email about what happened after I was adopted and some of the travails there. And those are some of the hard stories that are in the book because the book goes back and forth between the two stories. It's not just one story. It's these parallel journeys of the 2-year search for my family, my biological roots, but then also the 23-year story of what happened after I was adopted to the point when I got clean and sober in my life. And there were many things that were really a struggle. And a lot of people would say, Kevin, don't write that story. That's a hard story. And I said, yeah, but it's my story. And I couldn't tell you right off the top of my head the date and time. I should look it up for the next time somebody asked me that. But I have that email. And what I started to do was sometimes 2 a.m, sometimes 3 p.m, sometimes on a Sunday after my breakfast, I would just flip open my laptop and I'd write a paragraph or two, or maybe a few. And I would write it in email form and then just save it as a draft for myself or send it to myself. And the way I started to communicate was I realized that writing my story was going to have to be this personal telling. And I felt like that the email kind of mentality, like you're trying to convey something very personal, made it a little bit easier for me to do rather than just sitting down with the structure of a book and trying to conceive of a story. So that's when it started. I should find that old email and I could give you an exact date and time.
Well, I found myself rereading the beginning of your book, the prologue, at least 3 times before I could even proceed to read the first chapter, because I loved that you're taking that deep breath in, and at the end of that prologue is just the word exhale. And I know we talked about this a little bit before we started recording today, and just how I sat there and just went, this is a story that takes a little preparation to tell. And it felt like, I think for all of us, when things are a little difficult or when we're trying to get ready for something or anticipate something, you have to exhale. And for me, that was a lovely moment. And then I went into the chapter titles. And can you tell me a little bit about how you chose the titles of each chapter?
The original outline, when I finally kind of put the writing tools into place to outline the book before I structured it and put all these pieces, these emails I had written, and started to really put them all into place and organize them. The original structure was going to be this parallel journey that would go back and forth, and I did not have those chapter headings.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there was a piece of the process that happened during the editing with Ginny Ruths, who was from Touchstone Publishing. Hi, Ginny. She'll listen to this. That we worked together to really see if there were some common themes. Now, originally, when I outlined the book and started to put it into place, there were 3 or 4 general themes. But what we recognized as we were editing, and what I recognized as I was processing all this, was there were some thematic moments, and those moments allowed us to really have beginnings, middles, and ends to chapters. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that the story goes back and forth. So where does a chapter start and end? Do we cut those? And we started to really be able to piece them together. The real difficulty was trying to make those time frames work, because sometimes a theme seemed to overlap with another theme. So we realized that some of these themes would be, or headings, let's say, for the chapters, would maybe be a little more loosely tied to the entirety of a chapter. But it was the moments of transition that we were looking for. So each heading of a chapter, leaving, longing, losing, those pieces, hopefully, would convey to the reader not just a theme for each chapter, which I think some people looked very, very closely for those themes and tried to dissect them. It really is meant to be more of a map, right? So to find the emotional through line. And just like you and I know from theater, that's what you're looking for in a play, right? You have got a 2-act play, but you need to see the through line for that story. And each beat, and that's the way I think I looked at it, each beat would not just be an emotional moment, but an understanding of how we're moving from one moment to another. How do we get from here to there? What's the call and response sometimes? And that's difficult to do from a reader's perspective. And I think the themes or the chapter headings hopefully would help the reader transition from one moment to the next.
I definitely loved the guidance of that chapter and the contents, the leaving, the longing, the stumbling, the shifting, the becoming. And it was just so beautifully done, where a lot of times in a book, the chapter headings would be more of a sentence. And so I really just kind of liked the fact that you were giving the reader, this is kind of the roadmap to the book. And when somebody reads this book and the time hop is happening, it's very apparent how that chapter title sums up not just your current story, but the past as well. And your description of people and the dialogue, I think the dialogue is the part that grabbed me the most when reading this. The true conversations between the people that you're writing about. Did you have trouble recollecting or recalling conversations that you had with people from a long time ago?
No, it's really funny you asked that. Thank you so much for, I guess I'm going to use the word complimenting me on the dialogue, because it feels like an ultimate pat on the back, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say that the dialogue was always daunting, and I think dialogue is daunting for writers in general. There are, full classes and master's degrees that focus on that, and I felt pretty daunted by it myself, to the point where working with an editor was helpful. But I will say in my proofreading stage, I had two separate proofreaders, and the last proofreader made a comment about that to me in the proofreading, saying your dialogue is really, really well, it's like, I don't know what word she used, but she heightened it. And I felt so not confident at that point that I had done the best I could, but I felt so rewarded in hearing that from a professional and hearing that from you. And I know you're a teacher, and I know you're someone who really understands literature. That's really and a reader. And that's really a wonderful compliment to me. Gosh, what was the question again? I got
You have trouble recalling these conversations with people.
Sorry, I guess the compliments throw me more than the criticisms, right? Gosh, what an adoptee I am. I think being an only child was one of the things that put me in a place where I was full of remembrances. I was full as a kid. I remember being a real fantastical thinker, someone who just regurgitated things over and over again in my brain and retold stories to myself and revisited books I had read or conversations I had had. So I think that I not only regurgitate these stories in my head over and over and over again over the years so that they're more accessible, I also tend to be a storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
I'm someone who likes to have a conversation. You and I have been on the line for over an hour now, and most of it was just chatting.
Right.
And before we even hit the record button. And it's lovely for me to have those opportunities to get to know another person. And I think that most people get to know me through my storytelling. And so I think much of that dialogue, I'd already told those stories so many times to other people. Putting them into print was more of a task because it's one thing to say it out loud to someone, but it's another thing to slow that process down and remember the moments, because I'm not just putting in the words, am I? I'm also telling you about somebody who flicked a cigarette away, or the heat of the day, right? Because a dialogue between two people or even between a group of people, is enhanced by their surroundings. So dialogue itself, in the way that even you and I think of it as theatrical people, is it's not just words flapping back and forth. It's the essence of the moment, everything that's happening emotionally, physically, mentally, and even spiritually. And so you'll see dialogue in there, hopefully, that bring out some of those pieces in a way. And I think the earliest dialogue, as you know, is between me and Roz, the birth mother, who had given up her twins and introduced me to the possibility that I could search for my biological mother, my first mother. And that is probably everything I just mentioned, because there's the physical of where we are, how it feels, what we're doing. There's the intellectual, the mental. There's the emotional, obviously. But as you remember from that piece, that part of the chapter, there's the spiritual essence of something almost otherworldly is happening in that conversation. And yet I had to convey that all in simple dialogue. But I think that's, to sum it up, I think that I remember the words, but what I really remember is the experience, and the words allow me to convey that experience.
Yeah, it's so well done. And for me as the reader, I'm finding myself in the moment, and it's so grabbing to me. And I guess that's why I'm reading it so slowly, because I feel like so into this story where, and I told you prior to recording that I had some outward emotional reactions to a few things that you were talking about. And I think that's very difficult for authors to do, because it's there on a page. And if your reader can visualize what's happening and feel that type of emotion, you've definitely done something right. So I have spent the better part of the hour prior to recording complimenting you on this, but I definitely want those that are listening to also know that that's the type of experience that you do get with this book. And I'm not sure if anyone else has said that to you, but it's a lovely memoir, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. Can you talk about the photos on the cover a little bit?
Sure. I had a contest the other day, and people had to guess which one was my bio mother, which one was my adoptive mom. And it was really amazing, because there's 3 pictures there. Mm-hmm. And one is me, and it's the little baby Kevin with a little alfalfa haircut there. And it's one of the favorite pictures of all time for me. If I pulled the picture out from where it belongs, you'd be amazed. It's actually a part of that picture is a part of a bronze. What do I want to call this? My parents had my baby shoes, my first pair of shoes, bronzed, and they put it together on this little stand, and there's a picture of me, as a part of that framed. And it's hard to describe it as a writer. How would I describe that? But it's this neat picture that I pulled out, and it's one of my favorite pictures of me. The other picture is of my adoptive mom, and she had that picture done when she was, I think, graduating from high school. That was her high school graduation picture. And to believe it or not, that picture was in my house growing up all my life. And, it's one of those pictures you see it all the time. You don't think about it. And I was with my wife. I think we were dating at the time. We were living in New York City, and I came back upstate from the city. And I remember walking into, my parents' house, and walking past that picture that I had seen thousands, tens of thousands of times probably. And I just stopped, and I gasped, and I caught my breath, and I just stared at it, and I almost cried. And I realized that I had never really seen my mother that way, because it's my mother, of course, this older Polish lady. And this was this 99-pound woman staring out at the picture of me with this smile, this youthful exuberance on her face. And I literally, in that moment, fell deeply in love with her. I said, oh my God, if I wasn't dating this woman that I was going to marry, I'd want to marry that woman in the picture.
Right.
I literally fell in love with her. And it was a turning point for me. So I always knew that was a special picture for me, but that was years before the book was even conceived.
Mm.
The other picture, I don't know about you, but as an adoptee, I didn't feel for a long time worthy of, being, even knowing my first mother. I didn't know why I'd been put up for adoption. I didn't know where she had gone or who she was or where she came from or went to. But I didn't feel like it was owed me, but I felt like if I could have one wish, one thing, it would be a picture of her around the time that I was born. And, I always had to kind of leave that as my, I guess, lowest expectation. But that's the picture that you see there. That is a picture that after my search concluded, I was able to find. And it's a picture of her, not in the days that she was pregnant with me, but it's soon after I was born. And it is a treasure for me. And I think she's, again, when I look at that picture, I see another beautiful, beautiful woman that I have fallen deeply in love with. And I guess I want to marry both my moms now.
They're absolutely stunning women, both. And I can see where you would say that. I mean, they're absolutely stunning. And of course, the photo of you is, I love the hair. It's adorable. It's great. And then on the back, of course, there's a photo of you fairly present day. The other is a drawing?
It is. It's a pastel. Yes.
Okay. Do you know who did that or when it was made?
I do, and it was chosen very carefully. It has a real place in the book. It was drawn by someone, of course, that I won't know, and I'm not sure of the name, although it is signed. But I have a very specific image of the artist. He was basically a college hippie artist in Provincetown in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, on a summer trip that we had there. He was a street artist, and I don't remember too much. I have little flashes of memory about him and a friend of his making some obscene jokes. And, they were just really, these were hippie days. It was 1971 and it was July. And I was 9 years old. And there's a reason I put that picture on the back of the book and juxtaposed it with the picture of me now. Because the picture on the front, of course, is me as the little baby that was adopted, the little baby that was relinquished. So there's a whole story there. And the picture on the back has me now, this author picture, as it would. And that's so people can see who I am now and have an understanding of, a 58-year-old, lost track, 58-year-old guy who just has a fairly normal life in many ways. But that other picture is the last image that was taken of me, more specifically drawn of me, before things went off the rails in my life. That was the same summer that I, and it's in the book, that I ended up in a 4-H club, which is like the Boy Scouts or the Cub Scout, except in our area, 4-H is really more about the environment and agriculture and farming and, understanding the land around you. And unfortunately, the 4-H leader was a pedophile who molested us. Mm-hmm. And so that picture on the back is one of a very sweet little boy, probably a month or so. I don't have exact dates, of course, but that was done in July. It's dated. And I know that the abuse happened, I think most likely at the end of that summer or the beginning of the maybe before the school year started. Mm-hmm. So it was after that vacation. So there's a real specific reason that picture is there. It's also that pastel hung in my parents' house all of my life after it was brought home from the Cape, and they had it over the TV. You and I were talking about how our parents would sit in their lazy boys, and my dad would sit and watch TV. Well, right above that TV was that pastel drawing. All of my life. My wife, Ellie, will tell you that she used to call that, the shrine of Kevin, because it was this, picture up there with me. And I don't remember what else was up there, but it was just, so it has a lot of meaning. But yeah, that's where that came from.
Wow. And, there are some definitely difficult parts of your story and of this book. And I'm wondering, for the reader, what do you hope that they will get from your story?
That's a really beautiful way of putting it. What will they get from the story? Because I think that when I think about what I would hope is that I think readers in general would find some kinship and understand that, even if they haven't lived through some of the pieces that I've lived through, we've all lived through various things as adoptees. Of course, I suffered some sexual abuse and physical abuse. And also there's a lot in the story of what happened when I walked down the path, and when we walked down the path of addiction and alcoholism. And there's much in there that I think many of us hope will never happen to us or people we love. But as we know now, it does. It's very, I wouldn't want to use the word common, but it's not uncommon. And I think understanding what people could really take away from this or get from this book is that it takes a lot of courage to read a book like this. It certainly does. People say it takes courage to write it. And I say, yes, it does. And there's a lot of hard decisions that have to come when writing something like this. But I think that if you've had the courage, if you take the courage and have the courage to read this, I think that, I've discovered, and hopefully someone else will get from this book, that I play an important part in my own well-being. And I want to celebrate all the achievements of my life. And I want to be grateful for all that I've been given. I mean, I'm not perfect. Right? Mary, you're not perfect. I'm not perfect. Annie's not perfect, but we're all pretty excellent. Yeah,
absolutely.
Right? And I think the beautiful thing is that if anyone would take anything from this, it would be that kinship. But if you would get something, I think it would be that understanding that we can do in community, that what we can't do alone. And I want to every day celebrate that, understanding that, doing things like this, doing a podcast, communicating with one person like you and I are communicating together, and then letting that get out there in the world, as risky as that feels, it's the beginning of an adventure that has just uncovered so many miracles and so much beauty for me. I don't want to say that I am completely healed from my past. That'd be unfair, because I still struggle at times, but I don't have any regrets. And I think that if you're struggling or you're suffering, or someone who has struggled or has suffered or is confused by their own past or their own present, their own predicament, their own circumstances, that there's hope. And that there is community that is available, whether it be, for me, some of the 12-step programs, therapy is something that's been helpful for me. Communities like this, the adoptee community, has just been lifting me up and lifting me up and lifting me up day after day after day. I don't know what I would do without it. And discovering those communities even closer to home. There's people that have read my book in my neighborhood now. It's a little daunting, but they've reached out and they've connected, and it's helped us to get to know each other more. I've had a friend who, he's known me for 13 years. And he said, Kevin, I knew all these stories. I knew them all. He said, but I didn't know this. So opening our hearts to each other, opening our stories to each other, in whatever way is possible. I don't think everyone needs to write a book, should write a book, or would want to, or maybe even tell as much as I do. But telling the little bits that we've never told before to even one person, it's going to really open up the door. and I'm learning to treat myself as if I'm valuable. I find that when I practice that long enough, I begin to believe it.
So what's next for you? Another book?
The idea of writing another book was never on the table when I was writing this one. It was literally it felt like an impossibility. And when I finished the formal edit, and I was really felt like I was done with everything except the proofreading, I read it through twice. Mm-hmm. The first time I read it through, I said, oh, gosh, what have I done? And the second time I read it through, I was probably about halfway through before it started to sink into me. First of all, I felt that I was confident that I'd set out to achieve what I wanted, which was I would have no regrets because I had done the best I could, and I was proud of the work, and I believed it would help others. And so I was ready to publish. So that was one piece. And then, unbeknownst to me, it hit me that there were more stories to tell. And I really would have been happy and still would be happy if I never wrote another word in many ways, because it can be a grueling exercise, and also it's just a real commitment. But to be honest, this book covers two sections of my life. And the one is of course, 2-year search for my biological family. And that's a very compact 2005 to 2007. Those were 2 years of my life. Mm-hmm. That's a real compact area. Mm-hmm. There's the other part of the story is from the time I was born in 1962 to the time that I got sober in 1986. But what's the gaps there are from 1986 until 2005. There's some allusions to, of course, what happened, because my life I'm capable of writing all that. But that story's untold. And the other story that's untold is the part of what happened after that search concluded in 2007, because that's really where the book ends in a timeline, the most recent. And say from that timeline, what happened after the search was completed, mm-hmm. and what brought me to now. So if there is a second book, that would be it. That's a concept, not a reality. There's an outline and an understanding that would make sense to the reader. I think a lot of people finish this book and want to know more. Now, that was not particularly why I ended the book the way I did or how I conceived it, but it just felt very right to end it without giving everyone all the answers. Now, there's an understanding and a real desire, I think, in many ways, to write a third book if there is one. Of course, I'm 58 now, and I don't know how much time I've got left to do this, but the third one would probably be, for lack of a better way to say it, current, right? Like almost writing in the day. So, it would be less of a section of time and the back and forth storyline than it would be adding up all the lessons learned and where I am now. And some of that is really, I think, indicative of what because you've watched my YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. That's more current. And I think that would be the third book. And so if there is a trilogy, that would be it. Of course, those are all concepts now, and more, I'm more thoughtful of, the process now. I think I've learned a lot from writing the first book, so I think I could probably condense the timeline a little more as far as how long I would take to write it. But the outline's ready for the second one, and the concept is ready for both.
Because it doesn't seem as though your story, and for many adoptees, that the story's never really done. There's always a little extra that maybe goes unexplored. And you and I were talking a little while ago about an area that you are exploring. Did you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. If you ask the question, I'll answer. How's that?
Okay. So we talked a little bit about your just searching for your biological father side of the family, and specifically your biological father. And I was hoping that maybe you could tell people the process that you're going through and what you found out so far.
Yeah, that's been it's been quite an ordeal and an endeavor. When the pandemic hit in March, I was home, and you know, I didn't see it coming. I was in the middle of getting ready for the book coming out, and I had a lot on my plate. But I really took the time to start to say, "Gosh, maybe it's time to open this door a little bit." I had never made it a priority, and I don't think you and I talked about this earlier, but looking for my first mom, that was the only thing that seemed to pull at me, tug at me, really be the underlying need that couldn't go unexplored. And it just took a lot of years to even begin that process, to even open up to that search possibility, and to even own those needs, those wants, those wishes. And it's been quite a tour. And I think that looking for my paternal roots and my biological father really felt a little bit secondary. I think maybe because there's a piece of me that carries my father with me, but I wasn't in my father. I wasn't carried by my father. I wasn't a quote unquote part of my father, like I was my mother. And so I felt that real. I think many of us adoptees know the phrase the primal wound, and I felt that real primal wound, and it was really a tearing away from my mother, not a tearing away from my father. I think that looking for him felt not secondary, but optional would be the best way to put it, until I was sitting at my desk this past probably March or April. I'd have to go back and look when it happened, and I said, let's do this. And I went to Ancestry and I ordered the spit test, and I got a tube and I spit in the bottle and I gave it to the mailman. I made a video of it, so if you're interested, it's kind of an interesting one up on YouTube, of me literally handing it to the mailman. Yeah. And I sent off my spit, and I really had that moment of trust, though. And I think a part of that was I learned that through the process of searching for my mom. I'd also learned that a lot by being in community with other adoptees, listening to stories like these, engaging with other people online and otherwise, and getting that confidence that, I'm not alone here. Mm-hmm. People put their spit in bottles every day and they get the results back and it changes their life. But I had the luxury of knowing that it was a process, not an event. Mm-hmm. That getting that bottle out there was something I could do, and then be very present for, very mindful. It's a practice that I have of, how do I feel? What does this mean? How have I changed? What do I want to happen? And being open to the possibilities. And when the results came back, I was pretty flabbergasted by them, because I'm not an Ancestry guy. I don't understand DNA and all the different things that are there. But I got lucky, and I do have a dear friend of mine. She was the maid of honor at our wedding. And hi, Heather. Thank you for all your help. And she's been wonderful at really helping me put the tree together. We also used a tool called DNA Painter, which uses an algorithm with all the DNA matches, and you put it together. Again, these are things I don't understand or can't do as well. But my friend was able to help me with that. And through that, we've come to understand that I have some very specific high matches in the Ancestry DNA. And those matches are in the 600s and 700s, which are very conclusive in many ways as far as DNA is concerned. But I have had almost no luck communicating with the parts of the family that might be able to give me some understanding of who my biological father was. I do have an understanding through the DNA matches that it's most likely one of two brothers. One is alive, the other is not. And I've reached out hard and heavy to the one who's alive, and is probably about 85 now, I think. But again, the family members have been somewhat communicative at the beginning, but as soon as they find out who I am, have shut down. And I'm not judging. I just am sad and frustrated at times. I can imagine, as many other adoptees have told me, and bio moms, that, birth mothers that have talked to me and helped me sort through this. I've known that I'm adopted all my life. They're just finding out about maybe a part of their world they never knew anything about. Just about a week ago, I finally made the decision to reach out to the other brother. He's passed away, but he had two sons, and one of the sons is still alive. The other one has passed away. So if he is my biological father, I reached out to his son, who would be my brother, half brother. And I actually got lucky just in the fact that the number that I found was his cell phone, and he picked up. And he was very busy and probably picked up, maybe just not knowing where the call was coming from. Quickly got me off the phone because he was working and very busy, but said, yeah, sure, call later and we can talk more about this. And unfortunately, I've texted a few times and left a voicemail and haven't had any response. But it's the holidays and I'm trying to be patient and be very aware that, again, this is a process and I've got to be a part of that process. And I'll tell you, it's very difficult at times. I could not do it without the community that I found here with other adoptees. For instance, I, was really struggling with it and how I felt about it. And I've joined some Facebook groups that are specific to the search. And for us adoptees, it's very helpful. And I posted about it, very succinctly, hopefully, but informatively. And I got a lot of people that really gave me the feedback that I needed, without judgment, without any harsh kind of telling me what to do, mostly just their experiences, their strength, their hope, their understanding. And I feel it's important to be really communicative to my wife, let's say, and tell my wife that I'm doing this. She was a big part of the search for my mother. She didn't do a lot of the work, but I needed her there on the days when that work just seemed like I couldn't do it anymore. And so the same things now, I need people to be there for me through the ups and the downs, because whatever I find or don't find, whatever someone, if someone embraces me or rejects me, or I feel rejected, I need to have my community there. And that's my family sometimes even my children I'll talk to, and even my adoptive mom. I've told her these stories and it's been really helpful.
Tell us a little bit about your adoptive mom. We talked about her just a little bit, and she's probably one of your greatest support systems.
We're there for each other pretty strongly. About 4 years ago, just as a little, for instance, she lives with us now, and we care for her. She's 91 years old. I could bring the computer and the microphone downstairs, and about 30 seconds from now, I could get her saying, "Say hello to Mary," and she'd say, "Hi, Mary."
Oh.
She's been very supportive, and I think not reluctantly participatory,
Mm-hmm.
but kind of like, no, I can't do a video. I can't go on that. I can't. And all of a sudden, imagine being 91 years old, and after all these years and after everything that we've gone through, and it's been a lot for her, for me, for my, all my family, all of us, these are a lot of ups and downs.
Mm-hmm.
And she sees her picture on the cover of a book.
Mm-hmm.
And she is now on YouTube in a couple of videos that I created. And she was at the formal book launch and got interviewed by, Diane Cameron, a friend of mine who's also an author. And, she got to be a part of this process. Her life has been so full, and it's a wonderful process now. So as a, for instance, for my relationship with her, I think that gave you a lot of the parts and really gives you a picture. But like 4 years ago, she was driving home, 87 years old, coming home from dinner. And unfortunately, it was 2 days before Christmas, and it was dark out, and it was rainy, and there was a car coming in the other direction with their lights off, and she didn't see them, and she took a left-hand turn and got T-boned and broke her sternum in 3 places and 2 of her ribs. And I was at my house when it happened, which was just a block away, and somebody came to my door and told me she was in an accident, and I, of course, then was, 4 years ago right now, was by her side every minute in the hospital and then in the rehab. And I remember as time went by and she, needed to go to one doctor after another. And it was very difficult because, she was in a wheelchair now and, you needed a walker, needed me to help her every step of the way. And my dad had passed 10 years ago now, but so 6 years ago at that point. And I remember bringing her to a doctor one day. And this is kind of a moment I never share with anyone really, but you're asking what my relationship is like with her now. And I walked her in, and she was bruised all over still terribly. And she was, I think, at the cardiologist just getting her checkup. And I had to help her, get ready for that and change the clothes and things like that. And I remember we're sitting there and waiting for the doctor to come in. And just gently, just knowingly, without any real, filter on, she just looked at me and she said, "You're my best friend now." And I just, I caught my breath, but I recognized that relationship was nothing that I could have planned for, nothing that I could have even dreamt of, but it was beyond my wildest dreams. So that's the relationship we have with each other. And there's moments, we get on each other sometimes. It's a good mother-son thing, and we've gone through the mill together. Through all these years. But there's a deep, profound love. And I think we're best friends.
She sounds precious. And I feel like maybe it was on Twitter that you had posted a photo of her holding up the book.
Yes.
Okay. That now I can put a face with her. Yeah, she's absolutely adorable. And I just wanted to hug her the minute I saw that photo. So it's wonderful that you have that sort of relationship with your adoptive mother. And I think a lot of times with adoptees, people don't think that you can have that kind of a relationship with someone who's not in your bloodline. But it sounds like the two of you have just kind of, you have that bond, and you always did.
I'd like to say that. I think that there was, but I'd have to say that it's not true that it was always there. I think that there was pieces that were there, and maybe it was possible that it could have been there. It could have been the friendship that we have now. I think that the pieces that the blocks to that relationship were substantial. The book shows parts of it. Mostly in the book, I show my part in it. And I've been very careful to be generous towards others because no one's perfect. I've also been very, I think careful would be another word, the word again to use, with people's anonymity. I had my story to tell. And all these people, my mother, my father, my, relatives, the people that abused me or hurt me, the ones that really loved me and cared for me and maybe couldn't even help me because I wasn't ready when I was younger. They all had a part in my story. They all had a place in my story. But I tried to show everyone in a light that was honest. In other words, my parents were not perfect, but I didn't want to spend all the time showing their imperfections. They caused harm. They sometimes by things they did, and sometimes by things they didn't do or couldn't do or didn't know how to do. There were a lot of missed opportunities probably to help me as a child, maybe because of the circumstances in their lives, maybe because just of society's understanding of adoption at the time and addiction and abuse. And I think that now my mother has a different understanding of what I went through and how much I struggled. And I think she's grieved pretty terribly, and even recently, understanding now that the book's out, especially, and she hasn't read it. I don't forbid her to read it, but I really encourage her not to read it, even though she's really tempted and she has a copy. Because I say to her, just knowing even the basics of the struggles that I went through is what's important, I think, for me to know that you understand. And some of these things were very hard for her to comprehend and to cope with, why a boy who was, adopted into a loving family would struggle. and not feel loved is confusing. And now there's, I think, a lot of information and a lot of different ways of speaking about it. And maybe hopefully adoptive parents in the current society can have a more open mind to listen to those adoptees' stories rather than just listen to each other or listen to the social workers who are telling them that they're doing a wonderful thing when they adopt a child because they're giving a child a home. There's a partial truth there. I think that my mother understands, and if you listen to one of her interviews, you'll hear her say that. She said, we were just so full of love and we just wanted to give our love away. And that's a beautiful sentiment. And it's also a reality because they did give their love to me. They did. I think that it's a new understanding for her now to really see when I use the words abandonment, relinquishment, when I use the words, feeling unworthy, it starts to make more sense to her now. Because I said, that may not be what the circumstances looked like, but that's how it felt. And that's how I was affected. And I said, so when sometimes I've read parts of the book to her aloud, and she said, well, that doesn't make sense to me. And I said, no, it wouldn't. And I think that's really important. One of the things that happened recently was she asked me about the child sexual abuse. And she doesn't know all of it, because some of it's pretty harsh. But she wondered, not what happened. I understood her question. She was saying, tell me what happened. And that was when I was 9 years old. But what she was really asking, I think, was, not for anything where I would, admonish her or absolve her. She was just really trying to understand how the hell she missed it, right? How, as a parent, do you not know that your child is being abused by a 4-H leader? How do you not know that? And that's the relationship that we had to work through, right? That took 91 years. Well, not for me, but for her. It took 58 years, right? It took many years. So I would like to say that we always had the threads of all this, and we did, but it took an awful lot to weave them together into the friendship and the love we have now. You made I think a statement more than a question about, how hard it is and can be for adoptees to feel like they can or can't connect with, their non-biological families. And I will have to say to you, in all honesty, I don't know that I have the same relationship, and I'll just put it in that general term, the same connection to my adoptive mother. I don't know if I do. I wouldn't know the difference in many ways, but I can say that it's never felt right. It's never felt that it's been a real parental and child relationship from that primordial connection. There's something, I don't want to use the word missing, but there's something that just, almost rejects itself, almost can't. It's like two magnets coming towards each other and then they just pop away. So I don't believe that I have that relationship, but I've got the relationship that I can have with her. And she's got the relationship that she can have with me. And I have chosen, I think every day for years now, to struggle with the loss of not having that real, those two magnets that automatically come towards each other. Maybe the biological connection, maybe it's the genetics that's missing. And I don't feel that. I do feel like that's missing. But I have chosen to, if not embrace that loss, then accept it and feel it, process it, and know that I can find other ways to have a relationship with her that might be missing that piece, but can still be valuable and loving and incredible. And so that's what you're hearing now, is that incredible worth that I have found in having a relationship with my adoptive mother. Mm-hmm. It's not my biological mother. I don't want to pretend it is. But I will say that I have every day, although I still have the struggles and sometimes the deep loss of not having that, growing up with my first mother, my biological mother, of that relinquishment, of that abandonment. Those feelings are still there. That loss is still real. That primal wound is healing, but not ever fully healed. But now what do I want to do? I can't take responsibility for all of the losses that I've had in my life, but I can take responsibility for the beauty that I bring to the life I have today. And I want to bring that beauty to this, as you say, this very sweet 91-year-old woman. What do I want to bring to her? And I think that really sums it up for me. If I'm looking for what I can get from another person, it's always going to fall short. If I'm looking what I can give to another person, man, that's unlimited. Hope that helps.
It does. So we're recording this on New Year's Eve. So what are your hopes for the new year for 2021?
I'm going to ruin the end of the book for you. How's that? You ready?
Oh, no. Okay. I'm ready.
You okay with that?
Yes.
This is how my book ends. Well, it actually ends 6 months from now. So, I got sober. My last drink was today, 35 years ago. Right now was the end of my addiction. And at midnight tonight, I made a New Year's resolution that I would quit using drugs and alcohol for a year, not forever. And 5 minutes later, I took two more shots of whiskey, and those were the last drinks. So tomorrow when I wake up, I will have 35 years sober.
Wow. Congratulations. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah. So when you said, hey, let's do this, New Year's Eve, I didn't think twice about it. I thought, and I had no idea we were going to kind of get to this point where I could even mention it, but I was hoping we could. Because this will now be for all time. What did I do on my, the 35th anniversary, so to speak? And last year was quite a list of things that I wanted to accomplish. And I honestly am going to be hard pressed tomorrow. My wife, Ellie, is Japanese, and tonight for dinner, we will have our typical Japanese dinner. It's a nice soba celebration. She makes homemade soba. It's great. But tomorrow we have a very traditional Japanese lunch, a meal, and it's a celebratory meal with all these, like pickles and special stuff that she puts together. And she was raised in Japan, so she does it right, and it's really good. But one thing we do is we all, as a family, sit around the table and we talk about what we've accomplished this year and what we hope to accomplish next year. And I take notes on that. So I have notes from last year, and we can all look at what we hope to achieve. I have no earthly idea how I'm going to come up with anything for next year, honestly, at this point. And I think a big part of it is because this year's been so full. Mm-hmm. We celebrated 25 years of marriage this year, 28 years since we met. Celebrated my mother's 91st birthday. That was a big deal. And I launched a book, right? And, my YouTube channel has got, over 70 videos. And there's so many different things that have been beyond my wildest dreams. And I think the important thing as I get ready for tomorrow to make that kind of New Year's, not resolution, but, set of goals that we make as a family, because they're usually very personal, is to remember that I don't have to top anything. I don't have to compete and compare. I have to really find a way to say, what will I regret if I don't try to do? And I'll probably have to give that a little more thought, but I promise you, once I figure it out, I'll let you know.
Okay. I've absolutely thoroughly enjoyed talking to you. But I wondered if you would mind telling people who may not be connected to you, how can they find you?
Sure. KevinBarheit.com is a good way to find everything about me. So my website, and I know hopefully you'll have some links to this, but Barheit's a hard name to spell, so I'll spell it for you. It's Kevin, Kevin, Barheit, BARHYDT. So kevinbarhydt.com. I also have a YouTube channel, Kevin Barhydt. And the book is called Dear Stephen Michael's Mother. So there's two ways to really find me quick. If you Google Kevin Barhydt, you'll find me. But if you just type in Dear Stephen Michael's Mother, you'll find me too. There's two real easy ways. And I think Dear Stephen Michael's Mother is probably the easier one to remember and to spell.
Mm-hmm. And of course, we have your book on our website, theadoptionsquad.com. And you can actually go directly to the link to Amazon to purchase or to check it out. And it is an amazing, amazing book. And I'm so happy that we had the opportunity to talk today for quite a while, too. I didn't really expect us to be here at this point in time, but it's so easy to talk to you. And I absolutely hope that in the new year, you and your family continue to thrive and be healthy, and that you enjoy the success of the book and the compliments that people are giving you on. That's tough for some of us to take compliments, but I have nothing but compliments for you, Kevin. I wish you absolutely the best.
Thank you so much. It's really wonderful. And you're right. We spent all this time together and I still feel like I don't want to stop chatting with you. So I hope we get to chat again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kevin, for spending the time with me and talking about the incredible book, Dear Stephen Michael's Mother. And listeners, please visit our website, theadoptionsquad.com, so that you can reach out to Kevin directly, find him on social media, as well as a direct link to this wonderful book. And if you have a story of your own that you would like to share in the meantime, you can go to theadoptionsquad@gmail.com, and you can feel free to remain anonymous if you wish. You can also visit the website to connect to our social media pages and our YouTube channel. Please be sure to like, share, subscribe, and review to help us grow. And until next time, word to your mothers and to your fathers.